Hello, I'm Jerry Hacks, and welcome to the How to Make a Chrome Extension video tutorial series. In this video, we're going to talk about how to style and make the pop-up window. We're going to be importing a third-party library for our styling. We'll be looking at the requirements that we need to fill out the pop-up window. We'll build the inputs, the buttons, and the text. Finally, I'll show you how to refresh your Chrome extension so you can see the latest changes that you've created in the pop-up window. Let's get started. So right now, we have the bare minimum. We have our API, images, with the icons, the background.js that's empty, and an empty popup.html window. The popup.html window is where we're going to be focusing all of our attention today. But before we start, let's download the Bulma third-party styling library. I'm on the bulma.io website, and you'll see a download button. So click the download button, and you should see a zip file get downloaded to your downloads folder. Open your download folder and extract the files in the Bulma zip. Then jump over to CSS. The bulma.min.css is what we're going to be using as part of our app. The min just means that it's minified, meaning it's kind of squeezed together to save space. So as you can tell, it's 207 kilobytes versus the regular bulma.css, which is 245 kilobytes. Let's go ahead and drag this into our pop-up folder. Wow, that looks ugly. Let's just go ahead and exit that. So let's go ahead and start working on our popup.html code. So I'm going to use a VS Code shortcut, which is just an exclamation point and then press enter. And this will create the scaffold for the HTML window. And here I'm just going to name this global entry drops. Let's import the Bulma CSS library into this HTML file. Create a link that specifies that it's a style sheet. Link it out to your bulma.min.css. This is in the same folder as the HTML file, so the path is just the file itself. Great, so we've got our CSS imported. Let's start building out the view elements. So I have my Chrome extension on the App Store, and this is what it looks like. We have a label here with a tag that says stopped or running if it's running, location ID with a drop down, start date with a calendar widget, end date with a calendar widget, and a save and start button with a stop button. We're going to build all of this out, including the title here, but none of it is actually going to be working. We'll do that in the next video, where we start hooking up the buttons in the JavaScript file. So now that we know what elements we need on the pop-up file, let's start creating them. First thing I need is a container of sorts to organize my code. Bulma offers a little handy tool called a container. And if you go to the docs, you'll see that it says a simple container to center your content horizontally. So we are going to use the .container class. A very handy way of doing this is by using the VS Code shortcut for creating elements. So I just do div dot and then the class name. In this case, is going to be a container. Now let's go ahead and create our title, h1.title, and we're going to call it global entry drop. Let's preview what that looks like. Open up the Chrome extension window by going to Chrome://extensions. Hit the refresh button, make sure you have it pinned to your taskbar. And now if you do a right-click inspect, you'll notice that it looks exactly like our code. Let's continue working on our extension. So I'm going to add a little bit of margin here. Okay, looks good. It has a nice margin on the left, right, top, and bottom, kind of centers it, so it's not all squished together. I like that. So I'm going to continue using M-3, margin 3, on all of my containers. So now we need the status tag. So if we come over here to Bulma, you'll notice that a tag is just simply a span with the class of tag attached to it. This is good, but we also need something a little extra, which is the label on top. We can probably use the span for the stopped and running tag, and then just a label right on top using the label tag, and that'll say status. So let's jump back to our code. Let's create a div element with a field class. The field class is just a way of grouping together form elements on a page. Let's make the label with the status text. Create the running span with running. And we also want to create one for when it's stopped. Duplicate this line. Refresh the Chrome extension so we can see what it looks like. Come back over to Google Chrome, navigate to your Chrome extension window, hit refresh. Nice. It's looking pretty good. But let's add some colors to this because this can get kind of confusing. If I saw this, I may not really know which one is running, which one's stopped. So let's add some signs that make it easier for the user to understand what they're looking at. So for running, maybe green, and for stopped, maybe something red. I've done some of the work here, so I know what exactly we need to write here for the colors. But if you're interested in your own colors, you can find it in the Bulma docs. They have different ones like success, warning, danger. For the running tag, we're going to use is-success. And for the other tag of stopped, we're going to use is-danger. Right? Is-success, is-danger. Refresh. That looks pretty good. I like that. We've got the status bar complete. It's both appearing at the same time, but we'll figure that out later when we start working on the JavaScript portion of this app. Let's start building out the location, start, and end date inputs. In our code, we're going to duplicate the container again. I'm going to give it a margin of 3, and if we come back to the window, we see that we have a little label here and a drop down. So we're going to make it 3 labels, 1 drop down, and 2 inputs with a date type. Create a field div element, create another label, title this location ID. The drop down is going to be called a select element. We're going to put that in a div element called a select. So I do div.select. We create a select here, refresh. Not bad. There's nothing in here right now, but we see the location ID and we definitely see the drop down here. We'll have to fill this out later on once we start pulling the locations from the API, and we're going to dynamically fill this out. So we've got the location ID complete. Let's start creating the start and end dates. I'm going to stick in the same container, and I'm just going to create another field. Pretty much copy what we did above, call this start date. The input is going to be in a div element of class control, and it's just going to be called input. The type here is important. We want to make sure that we write date here. It gives the user a UI where they can select the date. So we get that for free from the browser. Let's create the end date. We can just copy this entire thing here, end date. Let's take a look at what that looks like in the Chrome window. Do refresh, month, date, year. If you click this, you can actually see the UI pop up. This is important. This is the reason why we set a date type on the input. Chrome gives us this for free. If I hit this, it pops up here. And I can also enter text here. As you can tell, we probably don't want to go that far back. We want some input validation here, which we'll be working on in another video. But for right now, this looks really good. Let's jump back to our code and create the last 2 elements, which are going to be the save and start button and the stop button. These 2 elements will be in their own container. Let's create another container, margin of 3. We'll use just a button. We'll give it a green color and call it save and start. We want the same thing for the stop button, a container with a margin of 3. We want a button with a class of button, and we want is danger for this. Hop back over to our extension, hit refresh. That looks good. But you know what? I want this to be the full width here. Bulma is really cool about this. It offers us another class name that we can use here called is-full width. So let's go ahead and use that here for both of these buttons. That's looking nice. So it spans the entire row. Gives you a little ripple effect where you can see it clicked. There you go. You've now created your first Chrome extension pop-up window. We need to do some more styling, but we've got most of it completed with this video. From now on, it's going to be mostly about validation and logic. How do we hide these status buttons? How do we fill out the location dropdown? How do we do validation on the start and end dates? So we'll be talking more about that. We'll be talking about making those API calls. Make sure to like and subscribe so that you can get those videos right as they come out. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Jerry.